for the vast majority of human history, however long we've been humans for, hundreds of thousands of years, million years, since the last 10,000 years, we've been living in these so-called civilized societies. Before then, it was hunter-gatherer tribes, much like the rare primitive tribes that are still existing today. Not particularly tied to any one land, hunting and gathering food, and living without a ton of responsibilities. Not to say that that lifestyle isn't difficult, okay? Coming from where we are now, it'd be incredibly difficult to adjust to something like that. But you can look at the studies, you can look and observe the primitive people, and you can see that for the vast majority, they are relatively happy. They have way less stress than we do. They have less illnesses. They're eating natural foods. They're outside in the sun all day. They're not sitting in front of a computer. They're not breathing in air conditioning. They're not dealing with pollution. They're not dealing with whatever signals we're getting from Wi-Fi. The rates of cancer are lower, the rates of heart disease are lower, the rates of, dental infections, and the list goes on. And if you look at those guys, some of them are in their 60s and 70s. They're lean, they're jacked, they're living off healthy animal foods and plants. And that was how we were evolved to live. We were evolved to live within nature, without pollution, without dumping all these chemicals into the water supply, without fluoride in the water, and sort of living amongst the animals as an evolved animal. I don't believe man is purely an animal. I believe man has spiritual capabilities, but basically we lived, within the earth, within nature, within God's hand. Now we still live in God's hands, but we also live in the civilizations, these societies that we've built up over the last 10,000 years. And if you compare the amount of human suffering from then until now, I can tell you it's monumental. You've got rape, you've got torture, you've got wars where hundreds of millions of people are killed, you've got pollution, you've got smog, you've got all kinds of diseases that didn't exist until the last 10,000 years. You've got governments, people who are not your kin, who tell you what to do. You've got this whole evolution outside of these small hunter-gatherer tribes where everybody knew each other, they weren't anonymous, and therefore things like crime and all types of horrible human things that we do to each other were much less prevalent, because you basically had everyone relying on each other to survive, and everyone knew each other, and everyone was related in some way. Now, of course, you had intertribal warfare, but the worst that was going on was attacks with small weapons and things like that. There weren't biochemical attacks. Nuclear attacks. It's insane to think that we've leveled entire cities with nuclear weapons that had fallout for hundreds of years after. Not to mention the fact that there were no janitors, there were no sewer workers, there were no people working in factories, there were no nurses working 3 jobs in overtime in terrible conditions to make ends meet. You didn't have to worry about insurance, you didn't have to worry about car payments, you didn't have to worry about your mortgage, you didn't have to worry about saving for your kid's college fund, and a million of the other stresses and strains that we have to be able to survive in a society like this, with passports and bank accounts and knowing how to invest and knowing how to build a business and knowing how to budget your money and avoiding all the myriad of traps and things to buy, and the fact that, for the vast majority of people, we're not capable of growing our own food. We don't own land, so we have to work and constantly worry about bills. And that's maybe 1 to 5% of the problems that people face on a daily basis. And if you compare suffering post-agriculture and post-civilization, it's my bet, in my opinion, that it's been massively greater. Okay, and if you don't believe me, just look into the history of any of the wars. Pretty much every country's had a war within its boundaries. You've got 25-30% of people living below the poverty line. In Africa and poorer countries, you got people living on $2 a day. It is rough out there, and if we're looking at happiness and suffering as the guide to human life and human quality of life, I feel like that has gone massively down for the vast majority of people, especially the people who are really suffered through wars and crime and all these types of things. So that's my opinion on it. But we are in a so-called civilized society. We are in a post-agricultural society. We're in a post-industrial society, and now we've moved into the greatest revolution of all time, the internet and technological revolution. We have no idea where that's going. There's AI. If you've seen Elon Musk on Joe Rogan talking about AI, that's some scary stuff. Hope it's going for the better. I'm still an optimist, but needless to say, to be able to survive and thrive in this kind of environment, you've got to be really smart. You've got to work hard, and some luck involved. I mean, I consider myself lucky just being born in Canada, having the education that I did, having the mom that I did, having the environment I did. I didn't grow up in a crime-ridden environment. I grew up in a first world country, and I've had tons of advantages for that. But not everyone has that. There's people suffering all the time of things that I can't even have a reference point right now. There's guys in wars right now. There's tremendous suffering going on, and in my opinion, civilization, agriculture, in terms of human happiness, has been a massive step downward. Maybe we'll get it together in the future. Maybe AI will help us. Maybe we'll learn to come together. I do believe in good, and I believe that that's possible. But the question is, you're here, I'm here, I'm speaking to you through my phone. Okay, I grew up on a rotary phone. Now I'm speaking to you on my phone. I have a business where I do videos on my phone. Okay, just massive exponential technological growth. And for better or worse, we need to learn how to survive and thrive in this system. Okay. If you're struggling right now, if you're depressed, I mean, some people choose the option to end their life. Okay, let's just rule that out as a terrible choice, even if you're suffering. Okay, that to me is not an option. Some people say they want to go off the grid. Okay, and you can go off the grid in Thailand, but I'm in Chiang Mai right now. You can see it's much underdeveloped than a Western city, but there's still Wi-Fi signal all around here. You still need to go to immigration every 90 days. If you want to go off the grid, you got to go pretty much 8 hours north into the mountains and survive up there with the tigers. And I'll tell you that, you're throwing away your passport, you're throwing away your bank account, and your chances of survival, I'm 35. Your chances of survival are very low. Okay. The other way people think is they can go farm and produce their own food, but I'll tell you, farmland costs money. If you're a foreigner like I am here in Thailand, you can't buy farmland. That's only available for Thai people. You'll find in most Asian countries that's your only option, and also in many countries around the world. So if you're an American or Canadian, you have to buy farmland, okay, and that costs money. All right, and you're not off the grid when you're using money, and you're not off the grid when you're using your passport. And if you have a health scare, let's say you're trying to raise a family on a farm, you're probably going to want to take your kids to the hospital, which means you're going to need passports, you're going to need ID cards, you're going to need bank accounts, you'll probably need a driver's license, and all these different things. If you want to truly go off the grid, you have to get rid of that cell phone, have to get rid of the passport, have to get rid of the bank that you use. You can forget about healthcare because you need all those things to get healthy. You can forget about all technology. You can forget about personal grooming, and you're just going to have to be able to, survive. And even then, it's like you're still expected to pay taxes. Okay, so to me, going off the grid's kind of an illusion that's sold to you by people with blogs who probably aren't off the grid themselves. Okay, and if they're using a phone and they're using an internet, you can just assume that everything you've ever typed and watched, and probably everything you're speaking into your phone, is being recorded somewhere by at least 4 different major internet companies, probably most of the intelligence agencies as well. You can say that privacy is pretty much done. There's a chip in your phone. Your passport tracks where you are. Not geolocation per se, but I mean, you can't get into somewhere without a passport, so your government knows where you are. Going off the grid to me is either an illusion, or it's you living in the mountains of Thailand with your passport gone and you trying to survive and hunt with tigers. Okay. Another option is a monastery. Okay, if you have faith like I do, I considered that in my early 20s. I actually think that's an excellent option. Have considered it many times since then, and maybe when I get older, I might totally devote my life to God. But I can tell you that the kind of discipline that requires, I'm not ready for that. Okay, even then, you'll still need your passport. You'll probably still need a bank account. But, that's effectively pretty close to being off the grid. No one's going to bother you. You're not going to be using a smartphone. But you are going to be living a very strict, severe, and you're going to have to be very dedicated. No girls. You're going to have to eat the diet that the monastery espouses. You're hopefully going to get along with the other people there. And, it's going to be a very solitary, difficult life. I think a lot of people mistake the spiritual path for, what a lot of New Age people tell you. And I think it's a very difficult path, especially if you're totally devoting yourself to it. But I think that's an excellent option for some guys if you have the discipline. With that said, you don't want to go to a monastery when you're 25 and realize that you can't make it at 35 and come back and have to start again in society. You're going to be way behind the 8 ball, and it's going to be very difficult for you. So that type of decision would have to be something that you would be for sure that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Okay, I think that's a viable option, but I think for the vast majority of you guys who are watching my website where I talk about health, wealth, relationships, lifestyle, mindset, and spirituality, that's probably not going to be an option for most of you, at least not at the age that you're at now.